Minute, a minute by minute podcast reviewing 1997 sequel Jurassic Park, 1 minute at a time. I'm Brad.
I'm Dave.
And today we're here to discuss minute 60 of The Lost World. Dave, we are at the halfway point.
Mm-hmm.
I had a look forward, and by the time we get to the 2 hour mark, we are in credits, so that'll depend when we get to there, how much extra we want to talk during the credits. Go through and have a look at some of the production, who done what, and although we pretty much cover that when it comes up in the minute itself, but
yeah,
we can work out what happens when we get there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were going to talk about Trespasser. We're going to finally get to that this week, but we were going to do Trespasser this week, but because I got in touch with Sam, Jack and Tim over at the Jurassic Cast Podcast, and got their permission to play their audio from their Richard Schiff interview that we'll get to in a minute. We're going to go straight into that. So if you have any feedback or anything on Trespasser you want to talk about, you can send it in. That'll be feedback for next week, and we'll talk about that then in minute 61.
Dr. Malcolm downstairs.
Until then, Dave, you want to get straight into 60?
Sure.
All right. As we entered minute 59 of The Lost World, Eddie had found a rope from the M-Class and was starting to secure it onto a tree stump, a lifeline for his friends stuck in the dangling trailer. As we start minute 60, he climbs back through the front windscreen of the trailer, carrying the rope with him. He reaches the rear section of the trailer and the accordion connector and throws the bundle of rope down past his friends. At 59 minutes and 24 seconds, as Ian grabs the rope, he yells up to Eddie, "Did you tie this, Senator?" At 59 minutes and 28 seconds, the trailer begins to slide with a large snap. They start yelling up to Eddie, "We're sliding!" At 59 minutes and 33 seconds, Eddie emerges from the front of the trailer as we get a look at it, slowly sliding backwards in the mud. Stricken with a moment of panic, Eddie turns and runs back towards the front of the M-Class. At 59 minutes and 40 seconds, he starts unspooling the winch. We cut back inside the trailer as Ian helps Sarah start to climb the rope. Says, up you go." 59 minutes and 55 seconds, Eddie runs to the front of the trailer carrying the hook from the winch in his hands. But as he approaches, he hasn't unspooled enough and it pulls taut, and he slips over in the mud. 59 minutes and 58 seconds, he looks up at the front of the trailer, slowly sliding away from him. And as we hit the 60-minute mark, we cut back to the rope around the tree stump as it's come loose. And this ends minute 60 and the halfway point of The Lost World. We ended off before, minute 59 with Eddie tying the rope around the tree, but it wasn't really tying around. The rope appears to have a carabiner actually tied to the end of it, and he just sort of loops it around and clips it on itself. I always sort of got a bit of a mirrored thing here with Dennis tying the winch around the tree trunk as well, or around the tree from Jurassic Park. Just more competently done.
Yeah.
He runs over to the front of the trailer and throws the rope inside.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also noticeable here for the first time that the side section, the expendable section on the side of the trailer, it's out. I don't know if it's all the way out.
No, it looks like it's only partially out.
Yeah, which makes...
I kind of wondered if the T-Rex knocked it when they were smashing up the trailers, if it kind of just knocked the hydraulics a bit and pushed it out. Yeah,
I know from some things more like your landing legs and that, they do have sort of a float mode or a free play mode where you can sort of disable the hydraulics and just sort of use human force to pull it out. But when the guys went to find it to restore it to try and get that back in, they had a lot of trouble. So, and also I wonder too, when we get to the Richard Schiff stuff in a minute, if that's possibly where the boom went through the side of the trailer and had to extend it out just to repair it.
Well, that's a possibility as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because that side section, as he sort of walks through the trail, we get a good look at what's actually in there. There's a little alcove sort of straight up that possibly have another computer, a little research area, and then we got the dining area. Or dining table there as well, that's sort of on that whole extendable part that goes out. We get a good look at the kitchen on the other side. We don't get to see the map again, but and we walk through the bunk beds in the rear, and he arrives at the connector at the back and throws the rope down to the guys below. And as we're saying, it's a long crane shot from when he sort of ties the rope off all the way in. And again, we'll post up some behind the scenes stuff this week, but definitely go over. You can check out the Jurassic Cast Podcast interview with Richard Schiff. I think it's episode 20, and he sort of goes into this scene a lot more. But just so everyone knows, or everyone's on the same page, I'll play a snippet from that interview here.
Lindstrat air rifle fires a subsonic Pfluger impact delivery dart.
Does it work any better than your satellite phone?
That's funny.
But there's a story to that bus. Because we were on that Universal stage for many, many days doing that whole sequence. And remember the rain. It was always raining. So there were sprinklers on the set pouring down this heavy rain. And I had to pull up with the Jeep, tie it up, and then run onto the back of the bus, which had been smashed open, jump up on the fender and run inside and find out what they needed, and then go back and try to save them. That's when I got eaten. And there was one take where that responsibility I had to not mess anything up, because I didn't want them to have to go back and set it up again, all this time and all this money, and I felt that kind of responsibility. So one time I jumped up on the fender. There's just a normal tiny little fender that I had to negotiate to get my footing, and this one time I slipped. And of course, I tried to save the shot. So I jumped, I slipped down, I fell on one knee, I jumped back up and started climbing into the bus, just got in, and I heard screaming. I heard about 10 people screaming, and I just kept going with the action. I didn't know what was happening. And then I heard the horrid sound of metal breaking.
Oh, God.
I turned around, and so I was being followed by a giant crane on wheels. I was pushed by like 8 crew members. It was a heavy piece of machinery, a big giant crane, so that it could follow me all the way into the bus. So the crane had to be very long, and then remotely it would bend down over me to see them, Jeff Goldblum and Julianne Moore, and Vanessa and Vince down there in the trailer below. And so I had slipped, tried to save the shot, so the camera guys kept going, and then there was screaming, and they were about to hit the back of my head.
Oh, gosh.
Veered at the very last moment, and because of the momentum of that crane that was on wheels being pushed by 8 guys, there was no stopping it. And so it took out the whole right side of the bus. It literally just cut right into the bus, about midway through the bus.
Amazing.
Stood there like in utter shock. And apparently, the thing missed me by an inch. That's what I get for being responsible and trying to save the shot. I'm clocked. And Steven was a little pissed off at the crew for whatever, the danger that was.
Okay.
But we all survived.
I'll be back in 5 or 6 days.
No, you'll be back in 5 or 6 pieces.
So as you heard in there, it was just interesting. He sort of had this massive crane with 8 guys pushing it, and being sort of dedicated to his job and wanting the scene to go ahead, even though he sort of stumbled a bit trying to climb into the front of the trailer. He still did, and causing the crane to sort of go off and through the side of the trailer and cause some damage.
Mm-hmm.
So as we said, it could be where that rear section is. It could have been at the front. I haven't seen any evidence of it in the behind the scenes photos anywhere. So, but it sort of goes to show too how dangerous it can be on set.
Yeah, behind the scenes pictures that are you can see it's this long crane, probably like 20 feet long, on a track in the middle of that goes down the middle of the set all the way up to the trailer.
Yeah, and then the camera's just remote on the end, so I can just do that little look down when it gets to the end of the trailer. But Yeah, that was just so he can do that long shot after he ties the rope off and goes in through the windscreen and all the way to the rear of the trailer, which it's still one of my favourite shots in the whole film. It just looks really good. But it's sort of, that episode 26 is a good one too, because it's sort of come out around the anniversary. So there's a little bit of language at the start of it while they're doing the Lost World Q&A, where they sort of bring up that theory of Nick on the boat killing the crew, and that's where I originally heard it. And it sort of sheds some more light on the earlier sabotages of Nick that we haven't really talked about, giving Sarah a camera with only 5 photos left in it, and pouring water on the fire instead of dirt. So they're 2 instances where he's sabotaging everyone as well. It's just whether he's doing it on purpose or if he's just attracted to destruction. But the interview with Richard starts at about the 43-minute mark in there, and there's some more stuff. He sort of talks about working with the animatronic T-Rexes as well, which we'll get to in the upcoming minutes. But the full clip about the boom incident is at the 1 hour and 10-minute mark. So the whole thing's worth a listen. But if you want to just listen to that bit, it's there. But a massive thank you to the guys for letting us do this. It's definitely a great insight into sort of some of the stuff behind the scenes that was going on here. Back to the minute. Ian catches the rope and asks Eddie if he tied it to anything, which a couple of good tugs would probably lead to, but it's just continue that comedy again from him. And then we get a loud snap, and the trailer begins to drop. Now, one thing I didn't mention when the trailer went over the cliff, on the pre-San Diego script, when it goes over, it actually lands on a tree that's growing out of the cliff's edge, and that's what's holding the trailer in place currently. And it's only, it describes a visual of the roots starting to pull from the cliff, and that's what causes the trailer to begin to drop. It makes sense too if it's only being held there by the accordion connector, which in the novel it was. That thing's the only thing that's holding the 2 trailers together as it's hanging. So if it's got something else assisting it from having all its weight on it.
Well, that also goes back to the first movie when we see the Forrest Explorer chase Alan Grant and Tim down the tree, and it's just being, not the only thing holding it up is the tree branches.
Yeah, yep, exactly. So yeah, the rear trail starts to drop down, and then we get a great shot of Eddie sort of looking over his shoulder grimly upwards as the you sort of hear the trailer groaning. And then we get another great shot too as he sort of, all of a sudden he's back outside, he runs around from the front of the trailer, and we got a low to the ground shot of the looking past the trailer tyres and a concerned face as it's sort of starting to slide backwards in the mud.
And you can see the set trees behind him there, which are really well done, of course.
Yeah, and you sort of posted up some set photos a week or so ago, and it's just, I just love how it almost looks like there's more greenery on the roof of the set than there is on the ground. Just with all the ghillie nets sort of up there hiding lights and all the framework and that. But it's interesting here because you got the rear wheel spinning freely. These are sort of set up just like buses where you got a lazy axle under them to hold weight, where there's no drivetrain going to them. It's more weight management, being able to put more weight on the vehicle, just to sort of spread out the load a bit. But I did do a little bit of research here because it's sort of the way the front or the drive wheel sort of spins and kicks. It's like manual cars will do that if they sort of getting pushed against their will, and it all depends on how the rear differential's set up with that too. But I've done a little bit of googling into the parking setup for these trailers, and found out there's actually quite a serious issue with the automatic braking system on them that's still present today. Now, they wouldn't be alluring this. The earliest report I found was from about 2002 or 2001, which is probably when the forum started about the trailers. So it's possible it existed before, where simply or the brake just wouldn't hold the vehicle in place, or just wouldn't work at all. There's people on there saying they've been in gas stations where there's been a slight incline. They've gone, the automatic brakes have come on, they've gone to climb out, and the trailer's rolled away on them. So it's just interesting to read all that and then see sort of this trailer just, it's got the weight of the other trailer hanging off the back, but it hasn't got the ability to hold itself in place. It's just going to start sliding and rolling backwards.
Yeah.
Because that lazy axle would have brakes on it as well. It'd have braking as well as the front wheel, the front drive wheel as well. So it's just interesting because I was sort of going off possibly like some buses and even trucks now or semis that have the air braking, where when you put that brake on, there's nothing that can get those brakes off except for air you build up with the engine running, which would mean that even the front wheels are turning as well. So the brakes aren't on. It's in park, but there's no braking applied to any of these wheels. So I just wanted to look a bit deeper into it and see if there was an explanation, but I couldn't really find one. And it's also too, I know once we get to what the aficionado and the guys that own the trailer now, it's definitely a automatic transmission, but manuals, I know for manual transmissions, they'll actually cause the engine to turn over if there's not enough compression there. And sometimes just having a vehicle in gear isn't enough to hold it on an incline. But most of the engines that I found of the braking system leads to a cable braking and an auto braking system in them, and also found that the 454 or the 460 big block Chev and Ford engines were used in those model trailers as well, which it dumbfounds me. An engine that big when you can have a diesel in there, it'd give it just as much grunt or torque anyway. But no wonder they're having trouble with the trailer now overheating.
Yeah.
But Eddie runs over the M-Class and starts pulling out the winch cable.
I like that shot they get of him before he runs there. He's just looking at the trailer moving, and he's just shaking his hands like, "Oh God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Oh, yeah. The winch." Yeah.
It's just that, and see, it's sort of like he's done comedy as well, so it's just that visual, and just sort of his not mannerisms. What do you call it? Just the facial expression and that of, oh crap, okay, and it's ticking over in his head. What do I do? What do I do? As you said, and then bing, like winch. Cut back inside the trailer, and Ian helps Sarah start to climb the rope, which put some knots in it or something. That rope would be so hard to climb.
Oh yeah, especially because it's so thin.
Yeah, and it got wet. It was wet when it came out of the M-Class as well. And we're going to get to what happens in a couple or next minute, but just sliding down it too is they're all dead. And we get a cut back. We cut back a couple of times to the cliff's edge to show us just how close the rear wheels are from going over. We get a few of them coming up, and it sort of hits my continuity anger a little bit when we sort of see repeated shots coming up. But Eddie winches out, spools out the winch again, sort of reminisce to Nedry in Jurassic Park, but he runs for the front of the bus or front of the trailer, only to come up short and falls over in the mud. And again, just sort of acting without saying anything, just sort of looking up at the trailer as it's slowly creeping away from him, and still that look of dread on his face.
I do like the shot that we get here before he runs with the winch, that we get of the low ground shot from the ground. It's like, is that? I mean, I know they're on cliff's edge. I don't know if they're on like a scissor lift or that they're just laying down in the mud, suffering for their art.
Well, as we seen from the behind the scenes stuff, there was two separate cliff scenes. There was because the trailers weren't on top of the parking structure.
Yeah.
Where that crane, we'll put the photos up. There's one shot of the crane actually holding the trailers above the 40-foot parking structure. That was for all the wire hanging out of the trailer and all that. Then there was a separate area where it was probably a 12-foot drop-off where the rear trail is actually leaning against it just for the inside stuff. And again, as I said, I'm pretty sure there is a crane or one of those scissor lift type things on the set there somewhere. But just so you can do sort of eddy on top and all the top stuff as well. But yeah, and it's just sort of, it shows too how much water's on set with it just sort of running off the edge of the cliff there. And the puddles. But as he looks up and sees it sort of moving away from him, we get a cut to the tree stump, sort of looking past the tree stump back at the trailer, and the rope attached there that's starting to move. We don't see what it's doing this minute, but yeah, wet rope.
I do like the quick shot that we get here also of the winch as Eddie runs away with it, the winch cable in the mud there.
Yep.
You can see bits of pine needles, pine twigs, and it's really just a great continuity shot from back when they covered the parking lot of Patrick's Point up with just a bunch of pine stuff.
Yeah, well, it gave that whole area that red tinge when we talked about that minute with the setting up camp, just to sort of cover what you'd assume is the asphalt parking area there. But it's just great that they sort of carried it over here. Yes, it's night time and it's raining and muddy, but you've still got the pine needles spread around on the ground. That's just about it for 60. Anything else, Dave, you want to add before we get out of here for the week?
Gonna talk about the set. The close-up that we get of the rope slipping away here on the stump. Now, of course, they didn't use a real stump here. They probably used like something made out of like some kind of hard foam. But it's really nice the way they did the stump. It looks exactly like one from the actual redwoods, right down to the moss growing on it.
Yeah, and it's not. There's no actual weight on that rope around the prop itself. All the rigging and all that was in the rear of the trailers, or the front trailer. They had all the rigging in there for the harnesses and that. For these couple of scenes anyway, where you're inside. When we get to later them hanging out of the trail, that's all done on the side of the car park. But it's just, it's one of those things. People have been making just like this stump, been making props like this for 100 years, and it's still something I can't go out and do. It's one of those things, like, we've moved on so much over time. Like, why you should be quite easy to go out and make a little steam engine. It's something that was so technically advanced 100 years ago, but now is sort of fallen away in the wayside. But you'd think it'd be so easy to do with today's technology. Like, hey Siri, build me a Oh, don't turn on, damn it. Like I see it flash, it's on silent, so I didn't get to hear it. But but like now you can sort of get a 3D printed one, but I don't know if you get one to work. But it's just stuff like that's always fascinated me, and just how well set construction that is. And again, we keep on alluding to when we get to the worker village. We're probably gonna fudge it when we get there, but I just love all this set stuff.
Yeah, me too. But then again, a steam engine, I mean, it's essentially a boiler attached to a piston attached to a couple axles. It's fairly simple, you know.
Yeah. From
the set pieces are fairly simple, but they're also so intricately carved and done up and touched up that you never question their authenticity.
Yeah. No, because I've got a couple of blocks of styrofoam here that I'd just love to carve. But then if you add if you use a petroleum-based paint, it sort of eats into the styrofoam. Just all that sort of stuff is just a headache waiting to happen. You spend all this time carving out something out of foam only to have it dissolve because you've used the wrong paint on it. But even just like adding moss effects to glass, stuff like that we're going to get later, I'd love to be able to do all that.
And the Flexa mold against the Westinghouse electrical switch, which is really good. I mean, it's just those little tiny details. They really bring these movies to life.
Yep. Plus the specks of yellow in amongst it, just to give that sulphur that little nod back to the novel,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all geothermal runs, so you're going to have sulfur, you're going to have volcanic sort of activity there, but yeah. Anyway, we're stretching this minute out.
All right, guys, let's get the hell out of here.
Contact details are on the website, thelostworldminute.com. You can email feedback to thelostworldminute@gmail.com, Facebook, The Lost World Minute, Twitter @thelostworldminute, and Instagram, The Lost World Minute.
Easy to remember.
Yeah, very easy to
All right.
remember. David, thank you for joining me for this record.
You're welcome.
And we'll be back. I've been Brad,
I'm Dave.
and we'll talk to you all later. Goodbye.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
It is absolutely imperative that we work with the Costa Rican Department of Biological Preserves to establish a set of rules for the preservation and isolation of that island. These creatures require our absence to survive, not our help. And if we could only step aside and trust in nature, life will find a way.